Hey everyone, how's it going? Today I'm going to be going over my Overpass CT guide. This guide is best used for teams, and it is also used for individual play, but for anyone who's participating in the ESEA Open, Intermediate, Main, or anything above that, any league like that, this will come in handy. Intro to Overpass CT. It's one of the biggest maps. It's got very long rotations. Generally requires a lot of map control. Requires strong knowledge of nades. Information is more important than a kill. Avoid man disadvantage at all costs. These two things right here are the most important thing. Information and that man advantage, or at least staying even with the enemy team. Because if you give up even just a little bit of that edge, you're going to lose. Or you're going to have to save, or it's going to be very, very difficult for you to come back from it because the map is so big and you already are spreading yourself so thin. So if you have a chance to get a kill, but you know you'll probably die, and you know you'll give up a lot of map control, just get the information and then fall back. What is a CT default? It's similar to T defaults, which I'll be going over in other videos. They're very generic. They're good for new teams and playing against teams worse than your own. The primary goal of them is to obtain information. And for my setups, instead of doing a 1-1-1-1-1, as you'll see in a minute, instead of having the numbers represented by long, mid, connector, water, and monster, it's simpler to have the first number represents the entirety of A site, the second represents connector, and the third represents the entirety of B site. The colors that you'll see on all the maps I do, they are much more important on T side when they actually have specified rules for all of them, but until then, the only ones you need to know about are purple, which are your opper, orange is your star player, and blue is me, the IGL. Our first setup is the 212, aka the primary default. I try and give all setups names so it's much easier to recognize them when you call them out. It looks a lot like this. We have a player in bathroom watching long, a player in bathroom watching mid, one connector, one water, and one on B site. The goal of the setup is to get basic info on the enemy and maintain map control. So you see you're at this like mid line with the exception of the B player here, and it's because you don't want this guy being too close because he's all alone. If he gets rushed and dies, B site's completely gone at that point. So this is one of the simplest setups you can do. It's great for new teams. B site plays passive for the reasons I just discussed. Water pushes for info but doesn't overextend. The reason he pushes out like this is because he has this player in connector to back him up. He can easily fall back and take this two-man gunfight right here. But if this water player pushes too much and pushes in here, he's going to be all alone, and there's most likely going to be enemy terrorists waiting out there to kill him. Connector maintains control and helps the team. As you can see, he comes out here, or he can run up and help out mid. The mid A plays for picks but doesn't overextend. Long helps out mid and covers long passively. This way he's in this general area and he can still peek out on long occasionally, whether it's running wide, falling back a little bit, or just listening. And it's safe to rotate through connector, which is going to be a big factor in a lot of the setups I do, whether it is or is not safe to rotate through connector. And this is good for gun rounds because of how spread out you are. It's going to be much more difficult to get kills by yourself if you're on pistols, where here you can get that single kill and use your utility to fall back because you'll have so much of it. Since it is a gun round, you'll have the money. Our next setup is a 3-2, aka the secondary default. As you see, we have 3 on A and 2 B. The goal of this setup is to get info on A and work together for picks across mid. Both B players stay passive. They're watching, they're ready to fall back if necessary. There's no one in connector. Mid A players work together for picks. Long player maintains control and helps mid. You see he's much further away from the rest of his team now because there's 2 players covering mid, so it gives this guy much more control over his own region. If the enemy rushes B, what the CTs want to do is shoot first, then start falling back, and while they fall back, throw their grenades. Throw any utility, grenades, mollies, flashes, even smokes if you really think it will slow them down. This way you can buy yourself time to get in for the retake. And it's generally not going to be safe to rotate through connector because you're giving up connector and you're also giving up water control. This is again another good setup for gun rounds. Our next setup is the passive default, and I generally try to have 3 defaults per map for CT side. That is a lot, but I always like to be prepared, and I'd rather have more than I need than be underprepared. The goal of this setup is to maintain site control while saving utility for retake and site defense. You see everyone is much further back compared to where we normally have this midline at mid. They're all back by site. You have a bait and switch setup on A, and what that means is you have orange baiting out shots on A while blue hides, and the goal is to get the enemies to run up thinking, oh, orange is the only one here, and then they'll basically get clotheslined by blue. It's a passive setup on B. Opera's rotator starting at B, and it's much easier to rotate because he's going through CT. There's no map control at all, and so that's going to be a big disadvantage to this setup. Again, rotate through spawn. Assume every attack by the enemy is an execute. What that means is that you're going to hear a lot of noise, and as soon as utility starts being thrown, you kind of have to gamble that they're attacking that site just because of how little map control you have. Again, the downside from that though is it becomes much easier to fake. The enemy can throw utility from up close long and up close mid, and then run back to connector, and at that point your opera might be by dumpster, and you'll only have 2 B guys when they're getting split. And consider boosting sandbags for info because it is something you can do from site. You can also consider boosting around A site. There's a few things you can do. And this setup should be used for when all other setups fail because of how much map control you're giving up. This is a good setup used when you have been giving that opening pick or opening picks to the enemy and not trading, and it's just a waste of a death and you don't know how to stop it, or they're just playing ultra aggressive. You can fall back and just defend site. Consider this setup as the last resort. And this is good for pistol because you're much further back. You're ready for that B rush. You'll have enough time to prepare for an A rush, and you'll have a good rotator. Our next setup is the 1-2-2 Tango connector. And the reason I call it a Tango connector is because you have 2 players in connector. Whenever I use a setup and I name it Tango, whatever, that's where the setup is primarily focused around. The goal of this setup is to get early info and picks near connector and A, and maintain map control. B site plays passive over here. Water pushes for info, but again doesn't overextend, and he does that because he has the help from connector. Connector players work together for picks. This is good when the enemy has been really abusing connector. They go through it a lot, they use a lot of their executes out of it, or they've been throwing a lot of fakes. This really cuts out their control of it and forces them to do something else. The op is not necessary for this setup. If, however, you do want to use the op, you can always have your opper play at B, and then your B player play in connector, just because this is a nice long-distance fight you can take and then be able to fall back from and get at least 2 more kills. Bathroom player holds long and mid. However, he can focus more on long because of this second player in connector. It's safe to rotate through connector because you have people inside and at both exits. It's a good setup for getting picks around the map, and this is a very good setup for gun rounds. Our next setup is a 1-1-3 Tango Water. You see we have the 2 players in water, hence the name Tango Water. Goal of the setup is to get early info / picks near water and maintain map control. Opera holds monster but is ready to run away. This is an example of having your opera on B site. Water players work together for control and picks. Connector maintains control and helps team. Bathroom player holds long and mid. Safe to rotate through connector, and it's good for gun rounds. And this is basically when the enemy you think is going to be having that B attack, they've been doing it several times, or they just have a very good B attack and you're not too sure how to stop it. Do this, catch them off guard. When they start executing, you can have these 2 guys push in, or you can just stop them from getting that map control in water, which then is part of their execute for site. Our next setup is a 2-3 Tango Monster. 2 players on A, and then 2 outside of Monster. Goal of this setup is to get early info outside of Monster and set up for counter B execute. Everyone holds medium map control, which is this line that I'm drawing here. It's basically right where bathroom ends. That's what I define as the medium line, and just before connector starts. Long player holds long. You see he's much further back now. He's not in bathroom. He's dedicated to long. This doesn't necessarily have to be the case for the strat. It's more just an example of showing that the long player can be dynamic in playing either in bathroom over here, in the corner, by the rocks, or back here. Bathroom player covers mid and bathroom. Construction plays for info, covering connector and water. You see he's not in water at this point, but he's making sure that no one's running out or in of connector over here, and that he'll be hearing if anyone's coming here to set up. Opera takes initial fight at monster, baits for second monster player, and plays for info. This is a bait and switch setup right here, similar to the one we had on A few rounds ago. And the second monster player hides until the opper needs his support. Rotation through connector depends on specific round scenario, where it might be safe for orange to rotate through connector if green has heard nothing and is able to throw maybe a flash or two and even throw some nades into connector. And this is good for anti-ecos because you are closer to your choke points at B, but you have two players here who are ready to easily trade and get more than just that 2 kills. Green is far back here and is also ready to help. Purple's ready to help with a short. And then your bathroom and your long players are also playing far back. So you're definitely having the advantage with taking the aim fights against pistols. Our next setup is a 3-2 aggressive. We have 2 players pushing long, 1 player up at mid, and then 2 at B. Goal of the setup is to get initial aggressive control over A, including picks. And what distinguishes the 3-2 aggressive from another setup where there's 3 on A is they're above this medium defense line. They're in front of connector. They're almost way past party and out towards fountain. The long players work together to get picks. The op is not necessary for this setup, but again, if you want to, you can always throw it onto B. Mid player works with long player to get picks. When falling back after the initial picks, you have to assume the enemy's already in connector because you have no one in water to listen for info, and because there's no one in connector, the enemy can easily run through connector and come up from behind with the amount of time it takes to get that first kill. So as you're falling back, make sure you are covering that. That's the most important thing to cover. Connector is not safe to rotate through because of how much control you're giving through water and through connector. Both B players stay passive, and this is a very good setup for catching the enemy team off guard if used after previously playing slow. Meaning that, say you did your passive default where you're all on site. Well, you gave the idea to the enemy that, oh, they're giving us all this map control, we can just run with our knives out, we don't need to worry about anything. Next thing you know, the next round comes, and you're so far ahead, and they're caught off guard. They don't have any of their nades set up to stop you, their guns aren't out, and it's a very good chance to change the status quo of the game and to get some kills. This is a good round for ecos and gun rounds. However, with gun rounds, it is a little more risky, because if they see the amount of players here pushing, they might just call, oh, they're stacking A, let's all hit B right now. And it's going to be a very long rotate, especially if connector's not safe. You're going to have to run all the way back through spawn and then come at B, or you'll have to push through and then either go through connector from reverse or wrap around through monster from reverse. Our next setup is the 4-1 A stack. As you see, you have 2 long, 2 mid, and 1 at B watching. The goal of the setup is to get initial aggressive control over A, including picks. Although these players are at the bathroom line, they are pushing forward, and so that's why it's an aggressive attack. Best used on eco rounds because power in numbers. All A players move together in unison listening to IGL because moving as that group, it gives you the best chance at getting as many kills as possible. It's not safe to rotate through connector unless moving as a pack. B players stay safe and plays for distant info, and basically what I mean by distant info is the information he'll be getting is, oh, they're executing B right now, and off of that you can either decide to attack, save, or play for exits. This can be used on a gun round, but there's a lot more to lose in a situation like that, because again, with the scenario from last round, oh, there's 4 players rushing us at A, let's all hit B fast, and then you'll have that very, very long rotation. Our next setup is the 3-2 endgame. The reason I call it endgame is because of how far back you are. This is a setup you can do after doing another setup. The goal of this is to defend both sides with very little map control. Does not have to be the setup at the start of the round, meaning you can do like your 3-2 aggressive setup and then fall back and get comfortable into this setup. Long player hides but listens and is ready to strike if needed. This is your classic bait and switch setup. Opper baits both A players to draw enemy out into vulnerable positions. Bathroom player hides but listens and is ready to strike if needed. Both B players stay passive. Not safe to rotate through connector, but because of how far back you are to spawn, the rotations are much quicker. And this is good for eco and gun rounds. Things to take away from this. Connector is very important, but is not always necessary. Extremely important to communicate and work with your teammates. Strong utility is a must. One thing I didn't have here is map control generally is a must. And most importantly, trust your gut in your training. If you do these setups enough, you'll become very, very comfortable with them. that'll become second nature where you won't have to question yourself, should we rotate through connector now? Should I fall back? Should we go into this setup? As long as you practice this enough and go through all the scenarios, you'll be fine. And that's the end of this video. I hope you learned a lot, and I'll be posting frequently. I'll try to be getting at least 2 videos a week. Next video I'm going to do is probably Cache, and then after that Inferno. If you want to see something else, leave it in the comments. And once I do my entire CT series, I'll probably be moving on to a T series where I discuss defaults and all the setups from that. I hope you enjoyed, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.